This is Travel in 10, a series of 10-minute travel shows from around the world that you can download to your iPod and take with you as you travel.
And now, your host, David Brody.
Okay, so I'm joined today by George Dunford, the author of Lonely Planets, The Big Trip. Thanks very much for taking the time to join me today, George.
Oh, g'day, Dave. No problem at all.
So this is a little bit different than the normal Lonely Planet travel guide. Can you tell us just a little bit about The Big Trip?
The Big Trip is really a how-to-travel kind of book. It's for first-time travellers who are looking to go overseas and have, what is sometimes called a gap year, or the Big OE, I think they call it in New Zealand. It's a trip that you go on at, when you're young and you can take your time and you might be resource poor but time rich.
Now, where did this sort of tradition of people taking a gap year vacation really begin?
Well, for my mind, it began when people began taking what's called a grand tour in Europe, and it was seen as a way for young British noble people to complete their education by going and seeing some of the things that they've read about or studied in the world. So they would go to Greece and Italy to look at classic art, and they would go to France, and they would go to all over Europe. But I think now it's kind of expanded a little bit to be something that you do possibly after university or possibly before university. It's really a way of just kind of, I think, about experiencing some of the things that you might have heard about and really, enjoying them as opposed to just reading about them.
Absolutely. And I think a trend we're almost seeing a bit here in North America is some people even sort of mid-career deciding to take a gap year and go explore the world a bit as well.
Yeah, that is becoming more and more popular, and people are finding new ways of doing it, I think, and building it into their lives.
Now, you talk throughout your book, you've got a great section where it talks about some of the best big trip travel experiences around the world. What are some of your favorites?
Some of my favorites would be things like going to Angkor Wat in Cambodia and, sort of going and checking that out. I think also I'm just about to think about going on the Trans-Mongolian Railway, which is another awesome trip, that you can just take ages to do. Ooh, what are some other ones? I suppose if you're coming to Australia, a lot of people will go down the east coast of Australia and, sample all of the beaches and that sort of stuff. In North America, or moving into South America from North America, there's things like the Gringo Trail, those sorts of things that people sort of do. Some of those are short things that you can sort of extend to go over, many, many months.
Now, one of the popular ways that a lot of people used to go overseas for a year was teaching English as being sort of a favorite way to go finance seeing the world. Wondering if you're starting to see trends in terms of other ways that people are finding to keep themselves occupied in their trips around the world.
Yeah, look, teaching English is still huge, and I think it will continue to be, for another couple of years. I think there was some study recently that said that at some point all the people who want to learn English in the world will have learnt it, and in fact there'll be a lot more work around people who can translate between other languages.
Right.
Teaching English is still a great way to do it. Working in the hospitality industry has always been popular, and it's one that's often quite difficult to trace, I think, because if you're going to work in a bar, it might be what they call black employment, so you might be working just for cash, and the tax department might not know about it, and you could get in all sorts of trouble for doing that. It's very naughty. But I think that still sort of happens quite a bit. Nannying or au pairing is also quite popular, and it's a good way to do it if you like a bit of structure, I think, doing something like that, because often au pairing certainly means looking after our kids, being in part of a family, and also getting some local language lessons as well. So it can be a good way to really get involved with the culture and spend a long time somewhere.
And volunteer vacations seem to be something that's popular as well. People going off and volunteering around the world.
Yeah. Look, there's this thing now called voluntourism, which is about doing a short, kind of brief, kind of stint as an aid worker or something like that. There's a bit of skepticism about them, I think, within some organisations, because some people say, look, if you're only going to spend a little time, you might not make a lot of change in a country, but there are longer-term sort of programs that people are opting for, and they're becoming quite popular, I think, as people sort of think, well, look, I do want to do something about the problems of the world. And I think, at the moment when we're all sort of rethinking, our position financially, doing something that's quite, community building is quite a good alternative for people.
And one thing I really liked about your book, I've had the chance to do a few big trips myself and a few sort of gap year type vacations.
Oh,
And
where have you been?
well, I started off. I did my first one ever was straight out of high school. Did a year in your part of the world there in Australia,
Oh, great.
traveling from Sydney to Cairns and back again over a year, and
Oh,
then
the Great
throughout.
Route, yeah.
That's right, and then throughout the South Pacific. Another one over in Japan and through some of the Pacific again, and then the most recent, my wife and I went and took a year traveling through Southeast Asia. And
Fantastic.
one of the things I loved about your book is I thought it really gave some great starting points to somebody looking in terms of where to get visas, where to get figure out all the requirements for going away. But one challenge that I still haven't been able to figure out, I'm wondering if you've got any great advice, is how do you pack everything that you need for a year in a bag and take it with you around the world effectively?
Well, I don't think you do. I think you think about the things that you'll need for the next couple of months, and then I kind of cycle through things. I remember when I was away, I would buy clothes, and I would buy new clothes, and and I think by the time I came back, I'd had a complete sort of change of wardrobe. I often think way too much emphasis is placed on packing because you can often buy things when you get there. If you forget anything, you can usually buy a sort of local equivalent, and often it makes quite a strange souvenir to think, oh, I bought that toothbrush in Finland or something. I think packing everything that you need is a big pressure on people, and I sort of say to people, well, look, if you do forget something, you can buy it when you're there. I think. And the worst thing you can do is really overburden yourself with luggage. I think if you're carrying a huge backpack and you see people, carrying their whole lives there, and you think, oh gosh, that's got to be difficult for you and possibly cause you later back pain. So I think, in some ways, taking some of the pressure off yourself can be a good idea. There's a great guy who believes in, just carry-on. I think he's mentioned in the book at some point, and he just has his carry-on luggage, and that's all he does, And if you're traveling for a long time, sometimes you'll often put down a bit of a base somewhere. I think for members of the Commonwealth countries, it's often, living in London, but increasingly there are other places you can go. And, there are chances are that you'll live somewhere. You might end up, buying a complete wardrobe, buying bits of furniture or
That's
a
right.
stereo or all sorts of things, as you go along.
Well, I think what people don't realize is you're going to have a much cooler toothbrush if you buy it in Angkor Wat than if you buy it in Iowa before you leave. But
That's right.
better story to tell about it, at least.
That's right, yeah.
So I would have to think, one great way to spend a gap year and one gig that a lot of people from around the world would love to get is doing some freelance travel writing or working as a travel writer. Have to ask, writing for Lonely Planet is probably something a lot of travelers from around the world would love to do. How did you get the opportunity to do it?
Oh, yeah, I did. I worked for them in their offices here in Melbourne for a little while, and then I, like everyone who becomes a travel guidebook author, you have to do a sample chapter, which consists of writing a slab of text in the Lonely Planet style, and then someone has a look at it and says, oh, yeah, that's okay, or oh, you need a little bit more here. And then based on that, you're accepted as an author, and then from there you can start to pitch for jobs. But yeah, it's a really difficult and competitive kind of world, I think, now. It's quite difficult to break into it.
And how have things, I mean, there's obviously a lot of great trips that you've taken around the world. How have things really changed since you've started backpacking?
Yeah, I think travellers are becoming a lot more intelligent and possibly more choosy about where they go and how they go. The idea of green travel, for example, a lot of people look at carbon offsetting a flight, or start to think about how when they go somewhere it's going to have an environmental impact. And people are also wanting to go further and further off the beaten track. I think, always people are going to think, okay, where's somewhere that no one else has been, and can I, go a little bit further? And I think it's getting harder to do that, as, you sort of find that there are tour companies going to places that were really quite extreme. You can go on the Silk Road now as a sort of bus tour almost, and it's finding things that are new is a real challenge, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember my most recent trip through Southeast Asia, my wife and I going into sort of northern Laos and figuring that for the next week we would be out of contact and not be able to reach people through the internet. And we arrived and found we had probably the nicest boutique hotel we stayed at anywhere in Asia with wireless internet when we arrived in Laos. So it is tough to find those undiscovered corners of the world anymore, I guess.
Yeah, but you've got to keep searching.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for your time, George. I guess one last question is if you could give sort of one bit of advice to somebody planning a gap year vacation, what's the one piece of advice you'd want to leave with them?
Oh, look, I think the thing that I learned was that, you've got to make sure you have fun when you can, that you don't sort of work too much. I feel like I worked when I was away way too much. So take the opportunities while they're there, I guess.
To enjoy it. Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for your time. Look forward to reading your next book.
All right. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Download more of our travel shows from around the world at www.travelin10.com.